introduce a friend of our chapter who has come up from San Francisco, from the office of the ACLU of Northern California in San Francisco. This is Ashley Morris. Her name and description are in the program if you look through there. Ashley is very active in the Northern California ACLU and a good friend of the Sonoma chapter. We've worked with her a lot and she's been very helpful to us. And she's going to bring you a greeting from the Northern California ACLU. Ashley.
Thank you, Marty. Good evening. It's nice to see so many people here. This is a fantastic turnout. And I want to give one more round of applause for all of the members of the Sonoma County Chapter Board. For all of the work that you do for planning this event and for all of the advocacy that you do here in Sonoma County to protect civil liberties here and across the state. So I just want to give a few highlights of the work that the ACLU of Northern California has done in the past year and what we have coming up. So as you may remember, last year, along with our partners from organizations like Amnesty International, the California Catholic Conference, the Friends Committee on Legislation, Power PAC, we came together to form a campaign called the Safe California Campaign. That group qualified an initiative for the November ballot to replace the death penalty with life in prison without possibility of parole. That was Proposition 34. I know a lot of people in this room, a lot of members of the Sonoma County Chapter Board collected signatures and worked tirelessly to pass that initiative. And you were successful here in Sonoma County. In Sonoma, the initiative passed by a pretty large margin. So congratulations on that. While we didn't win the election in the state, we needed about 250,000 more votes to win, unfortunately. We did succeed in really changing the conversation about the death penalty here in California. Since the death penalty was reinstated over 30 years ago in California, the conversation has really centered on what is the best way to implement the death penalty in California. With Prop 34, the conversation shifted and people started talking about whether there should be a death penalty in California. And that was truly a victory. So we know that more and more people are supportive of replacing the death penalty with life in prison without possibility of parole, and the ACLU will continue working with organizations that are committed to this. And our top priority here in California is to ensure that executions do not resume and not another person on death row is executed until we have another opportunity to replace the death penalty. And just in April, actually, Maryland became the 18th state to not have a death penalty here in the United States. So congratulations to our friends all over Maryland. This past March, oral arguments were heard in the Supreme Court in 2 marriage equality cases. One of them, I'm sure many of you are familiar with, it's the challenge to Proposition 8, which passed here in California in 2008, and took away the right for same-sex couples to marry here in California. But the second case, fewer people here, especially here on the West Coast, are familiar with this case. And this is a case in which the ACLU represents a woman named Edie Windsor. Edie is challenging the Defense of Marriage Act. She married her wife, Thea Spire, back in 2007 in Canada. They were together for 44 years before Thea passed away in 2009. Thea had progressive MS and became paralyzed before she eventually passed away. And while New York State recognized the marriage that was performed in Canada, the federal government, because of the Defense of Marriage Act, would not recognize that marriage. So when Thea passed away and Edie inherited their home and Thea's estate, Edie had to pay over $300,000 in estate taxes. Normally that transfer of an estate happens between married couples without any taxes because the federal government recognizes your marriage. And normally, the way the federal government decides whether a couple is married is by looking to the state and asking the state whether the state recognizes their marriage. But with the Defense of Marriage Act, that's not the case. With the Defense of Marriage Act, same-sex couples are treated differently than couples of opposite sex. And Edie's challenging that. ED asserts, and the ACLU asserts, that this law, the Defense of Marriage Act, violates equal protection because it recognizes one set of marriages differently than it recognizes another set of marriages. So we're expecting decisions in both of those cases later in June, which is also Pride Month. And I know the Sonoma County chapter will be participating in Pride, right?
Yes.
So I encourage you to connect with them and look out for the news about the results of those two Supreme Court cases. Here in California, we are moving forward with a very robust legislative agenda that I'm especially excited about this year. So every year, the ACLU of California sponsors a couple dozen bills, and we work on a couple hundred bills. We have a very active legislative office in Sacramento, and our staff in San Francisco, LA, and San Diego all work actively to move forward really great civil liberties related legislation. So I want to talk to you just briefly about our 3 top priority bills this year. One of them is SB 649. It's a piece of legislation that was introduced by Senator Mark Leno that would reform the sentencing laws related to simple drug possession and reduce incarceration rates and costs for the counties in the state. And this would free up money for programs that actually rehabilitate people with drug problems and decrease recidivism rates. And that bill just passed through the Senate floor, which was a huge victory, and we're excited to move on to the Assembly and get the governor's signature. The second bill is a bill that I've been spending the majority of my time over the last couple of months working on. Here in California, we really pride ourselves on having really great laws related to accessing reproductive health care. We have legal abortion here in California. We have a lot of providers. But a lot of women in California still don't have access to abortion care. And that means that if they live in a rural community where there's no abortion provider, they may have to travel 5 hours to get abortion care. And women in urban areas like Oakland may have to wait a couple of weeks before they can get an appointment at the overburdened clinic in their community. So the University of California at San Francisco sought to address this and thought that if advanced practice clinicians, including certified nurse midwives, nurse practitioners, and physician assistants, and these are all clinicians who already provide a wide variety of well-woman care to many, many women throughout California. If we allow these clinicians to perform early abortions, this would reduce barriers to care for women. So UCSF did a comprehensive 5-year pilot project in which they trained clinicians to perform early abortions and found that early abortion is not only even safer than we previously thought it was, it's equally as safe when performed by physicians and advanced practice clinicians. So Assemblywoman Toni Atkins of San Diego has introduced AB 154, which is a bill that would authorize these advanced practice clinicians with training to perform early abortion care for women in California and reduce the barriers that many women are facing. And we'll be going to the Assembly floor before the end of this month. We're excited. And then finally, I want to talk about AB 4, which is the Trust Act. And I have a feeling a lot of people in this room have heard about the Trust Act. Yeah. It is a bill that was passed last session and vetoed by the governor. But the governor has given us some really good feedback on what he'd like to see different in the bill this year. So what the Trust Act does is it limits the use of deportations from trivial arrests. It will help rebuild community confidence in law enforcement, and it'll be really good policy for California. So Assemblymember Chesbro, who represents a good chunk of Sonoma County, last year voted no on this bill. This year, the bill just passed the Assembly. He abstained from voting. But immediately after abstaining, he let the proponents of the bill know that he was ready to support the bill when it comes back to the Assembly on concurrence after the governor's amendments are put in. And while we're disappointed that he abstained and didn't vote yes, that was a big victory, and that victory was in large part a result of the advocacy done by members of this community. So congratulations to you on this American. We do need to let him know that it's really important that he vote yes on this when the bill goes to concurrence, and that we're a little bit disappointed that he didn't vote yes this time. So I can give you his phone number. Do you have pens? His phone number, I'm serious. His phone number is 707-576-2526.
Again, please.
576-2526. So give him a call tomorrow, let him know his community supports the Trust Act and that we want him to vote yes when the bill goes back to the Assembly for concurrence. We wish he would have voted yes the first time. So the Trust Act is state policy, but it's a great way for California to really pave the way for comprehensive immigration reform on a federal level. So that's one of ACLU's very top priorities this year. And I'm just going to touch on a few of the principles that we're really prioritizing as immigration reform moves forward. So first, the ACLU wants to ensure that the legislation creates a roadmap to citizenship that does not exclude people for minor crimes and past deportation orders, and that provides equal protection for permanent partners, meaning same-sex couples, who currently can't have their marriages recognized under DOMA. We want the legislation to restore due process by eliminating mandatory detention and ensuring bond hearings. We need to restore discretion and consider individual circumstances in deportation hearings and make sure that people facing deportation proceedings have access to counsel. We need to end local enforcement of immigration laws. Immigration enforcement is a federal responsibility, not a local responsibility, and allowing local officials to enforce immigration laws undermines their ability to develop community relationships and work with victims and witnesses on cases. And this chapter has also done a lot of work with Sonoma County, getting the Sonoma County Sheriff to stop cooperating with federal immigration enforcement. Great work on that. And finally, it's important that we reform border enforcement to establish safe and efficient border crossings and promote public safety in border areas. We need to ensure due process rights for all border crossers and also nearby residents, people who live near the border. We need to limit the use of detention, increase access to counsel, and ensure fair judicial review. So if you want to get involved with our comprehensive immigration reform work, on the ACLU table, which is in the far back corner of the room, I have our Estamos Unidos petition. So you can sign that, and then you'll be added to our Estamos Unidos email list where we'll continue to update you about immigration reform. And if you sign, I should have brought one up here. If you sign the petition, there's a really great poster back there. You can have a poster if you sign the petition. And if you took a poster and didn't sign the petition, you should go back and sign the petition. See? Beautiful poster. And there's a really great story about the woman in the poster that I won't tell you right now, but if you want to hear it later, I can tell you. So the chapter here in Sonoma County is a very active chapter. I'm not going to go through everything that I've heard that they've been working on over the past year, but if you look in your program, there are 3 pages, I believe written by Marty, about all the work that the chapter has done in the past year. They're one of our star chapters, and there's a huge number of ACLU members here in Sonoma County in proportion to the number of residents here in that county, so we very much appreciate that. The chapter has worked on everything from ensuring that Sonoma County schools provide comprehensive, medically accurate sex education to their students, to, like I said earlier, collecting signatures for the Prop 34 campaign. Steve did a lot of work around the Prop 36 campaign, to working to ensure that the Santa Clara County Sheriff isn't enforcing immigration laws. And if you like any of the work that you've heard about today and you want to be supportive financially of the work, we definitely encourage you to do that as well. We're currently doing a campaign called the Count Me In campaign. And this campaign is an opportunity for you to give your membership dues monthly, starting at $10 a month, going up to however much you'd like to give. It's nice because you'll never be bothered with a renewal notice. It's actually quite convenient for you. You can just give us your credit card information and the money will come out of your credit card monthly. And the really exciting thing about this Count Me In campaign right now is that if you enter, I think before the end of June, you will be entered in a drawing to win a trip for 2 to DC. It's exciting, right? So we call those who give membership dues monthly sustaining members. I'm a sustaining member. It's just a small amount of money every month that really augments the work of the chapter. The membership dues fund the chapter's work, and the membership dues also fund our legislative advocacy work. And like I said, we have a very robust legislative agenda on the state and federal level that I hope you'll support. So I encourage you to get involved with the local chapter. Again, it's a fantastic chapter here. I want to give one more round of applause. Again, I already did that, right? And thank you so much for having me.